In the summer of 2019, my partner and I, both in our early 20s, decided to go on a road trip to Vancouver, Canada. We planned to stay at Golden Ears Provincial Park. We both enjoyed camping, had spring break, and wanted to do something different for our vacation. And also, my partner had never been out of the US before, so it seemed like a new adventure for him. It was a 6-day trip with Airbnb stays in each state. The big finish was a reserved campsite at Golden Ears, near Alouette Lake. Our packing was not so great. We had a large tent and brought plenty of fruits and veggies for healthy eating. We stored them in a cooler that was too small and brought a cutting board and a small knife to prepare snacks while driving. We started in California and took turns driving our bright red Ford Fiesta. We drove through Oregon and Washington and finally reached Vancouver. We spent a day or two in each state, drank a bit too much, and stayed out late. Canada was the best part, as Alouette Lake looked like a beautiful painting. And there, we walked barefoot on the rocks and dipped our toes in the freezing cold lake. We hiked around and saw a beautiful waterfall. There was a couple taking pictures of each other for an hour, so we started doing the same poses from far away. Everything was perfect, and the campsite was empty except for that couple. We went to bed early that night. It was quiet, but I woke up to a crackling sound outside the tent. My partner was still asleep and snoring. I didn't think much of the sound because it was pitch black and probably an animal outside. Then the crackling got closer to the tent. I sat up and grabbed my phone. The brightness came on, but I quickly turned it off. But in those 2 seconds, I saw a person right outside our tent. I froze and sat up. The person outside wasn't moving, but he was close enough to unzip the tent. I started poking my partner because I didn't know what to do. He woke up, and I whispered, "There's someone outside the tent." Then I heard quiet footsteps walking away from our campsite. Then I heard what looked like a car or truck park nearby. It started up and then drove away from our campsite, but they didn't turn their lights on until they rounded the corner and were out of sight. So I couldn't see much, but it seemed like a truck. Now I'm shaking, but my partner is confused about what's going on. I want to leave, but Golden Ears locks the gate until 6 or 7 a.m., and it's only 1 a.m. now, so we're stuck here for the night. I decided we should move to the Ford Fiesta and sleep in the car. My partner fell asleep right away and thought I was just overreacting. I sat there wide awake for about 2 hours. Our car was locked, but I still couldn't sleep. I sat in the passenger seat, my partner asleep in the driver's seat. It was 3 a.m., and I was still half awake. Then, out of nowhere, I heard a car slowly driving up the road. Its light wore off as it turned the corner. So I thought it had to be the same truck, and I started to feel uneasy again. It slowly rounds the corner and pulls up directly in front of our campsite, again in the same spot. I feel like I'm going to throw up. I had no weapon but small knife we brought for the fruit and veggies, so I grabbed it and tried and make myself look angry, crazy, and big. I sat up straight in the passenger seat holding it. I kept it raised to eye level and stared straight ahead at the truck in the darkness. The truck stopped and turned off its engine. A light shone directly into my face from inside the truck, and I stared back, terrified, sitting in my bright red Ford Fiesta. Then the truck started up, turned around, and drove back the way it came. But my heart was still pounding, so I woke up my partner and said we needed to leave immediately. We quickly threw everything into the car and sat there wide awake until 6 a.m. We drove straight home without stopping. On the way, we kept talking about what happened, trying to understand it. As the sun came up, we drove home, leaving the scary night behind. We decided to forget about it and focus on getting some good sleep when we got home. I was around 21 years old when this happened. I started attending a college in San Francisco. I looked for weeks to find a place to live. Finally, I found a room for rent on Craigslist. The listing looked good because it was in a nice 2-bedroom apartment. The rent was cheap and it was close to campus, so it was perfect. I decided to check it out and contacted the person renting the room. The woman who lived there was around 29, and her name was Beth. She was tall and broad, with jet black hair and pale makeup. She seemed nice, but a little quiet. She seemed to like me and agreed to let me move in. So far, so good. On my first night there, we went out for pizza. And that's when I noticed something was a bit off with her. During dinner, she kept telling me how much I looked like Shia LaBeouf. I didn't know what to say, so I just shrugged and said, "Thanks, but I don't look anything like Shia LaBeouf," so it didn't make any sense to me. When we got back home, she asked if I had seen her room yet. I said no, so she took me to see it. Her walls were covered in posters of Shia LaBeouf. She even had printed photos of him all over her mirror. She owned all his movies. I didn't know what to think, but it was a bit creepy. Then, the whole night she had been saying I look like him, and now it was clear to me that she's obsessed with the guy. A few weeks went by, and I didn't really see her much. We didn't spend any time together. When she came home from work, she would rush to her room. She stayed in there all night. She had this creepy, high-pitched giggle, and I could hear her giggling through the walls all night long. I wondered what on earth she could possibly be doing. Sometimes she would come out and talk for about 2 minutes, but she always seemed to be slurring her words, so I thought she might be drinking a lot. Other times, she wouldn't say anything. She'd just stand in the hallway and watch me in the living room. And I'd turn and see her, be surprised, and say, "Hey, hello, Beth." Then there would be this long, awkward pause. Then one night I woke up around 2 a.m. because I heard what sounded like the front door being unlocked. I came out of my bedroom and all the lights were off. But I could see Beth standing at the front door. Her face was pressed against it, and she was repeatedly turning the lock back and forth. And every time she turned the bolt, she mumbled my name. "Max Barker, Max Barker, Max Barker." Seeing her standing in the dark, mumbling my name really scared me. And to be honest, she kinda looks like a bigger version of the girl from The Ring. So I didn't disturb her, and I quietly went back to my room and tried to sleep. Then one night I was watching Gladiator when she stumbled out of her room and turned on the living room light, making me pause the movie, which was annoying. Then she asked me if I wanted to hear about her ex-boyfriend. It was a weird way to start talking about it, but I said sure, and awkwardly sat back to listen to her. 10 minutes into her story, she was really upset. She was screaming loudly about their breakup. I was worried the neighbors might call the police, but she didn't listen when I asked her to lower her voice. Among all her yelling, one thing she said really scared me. In her anger, she said something that made me uneasy. Suddenly, I had no idea what this girl could do. She was almost like a stranger. Then a few minutes went by, and she came back to normal again. She thanked me for listening and started giggling again. But this time, I didn't say anything. and went back to my room to sleep. I felt really nervous being in the house with her, especially because my bedroom door didn't have a lock. So I moved my dresser in front of it to block it a bit, and I felt glad I did that, as after a few days, in the middle of the night, I woke up to hear my dresser scraping against the floor. So I turned on my light and yelled at her to stop. I pushed the door closed and shouted at her to go to bed. I heard her stumble back to her room, but I couldn't sleep after that. In the following morning, when I went out into the hallway, my heart sank. I saw one of her kitchen knives on the floor by my door. It gave me chills all over. I talked to her about it, and she said she didn't remember trying to open my door. She also said she didn't remember talking to me about her ex-boyfriend. That was it for me. Since my lease was month to month, I found a new place and move out. About a month after I move out, she contacted me. I was at the movies with my phone turned off. And when I turned it back on afterward, I was shocked to find over 40 text messages from her in the past 2 hours. The messages were all crazy, ranging from, "Hi, how are you?" to, "I hate you so much." It was crazy. I didn't reply, and she never contacted me again. I always wonder, if I hadn't blocked my door with the dresser, would she have come into my room and hurt me? This all started when I got a new roommate. I didn't plan on this, but I needed help with rent, so I posted on Craigslist, and within few days, Greg moved in. He told me he had some unusual sleeping habits, like sleep talking, sleepwalking, and night terrors. At first, things were fine, but as time went on, I started to notice the strange behaviors he mentioned. Funny thing is, I also sleepwalk sometimes, but it doesn't happen often. About a week after Greg moved in, I heard him screaming in the middle of the night. Since we slept in different rooms on opposite sides of the house, the screams sounded far away. Still, they scared me so much that I ran to check on him. As I got closer to his bedroom, he stopped screaming, so I just went back to bed. For the next few days, he was completely normal, like nothing ever happened. But then I noticed he had no friends or family visiting, and I never saw or heard him on the phone or texting. Then, on another random night, I woke up to screaming in my bedroom. In a panic, I turned on the bedside lamp and saw Greg standing at the foot of my bed in his sleeping clothes, athletic shorts, and a t-shirt. He scared me so much that I started screaming and woke him up. He apologized and went back to bed. Then the scariest thing happened. About 2 nights later, I woke up to clanking noises, like tools and hammers tapping. I turned on the light and saw Greg kneeling in a corner, working on something with his hands. When I turned the light on, Greg froze, then slowly turned his upper body around and stared blankly at me while I lay in bed. I was really creeped out, so I slowly slid out of bed and went outside. I slept in my truck down the road in an empty church parking lot. Around 8 in the morning, I went back to the house. But strangely, Greg was gone, and all of his things were gone too. There were no signs of him anywhere. It was like he never lived there. I didn't know any of his friends or family, so I had no one to call about him. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. When I moved out after the lease was up, I was moving furniture out of my bedroom. In the corner of the room where I last saw Greg kneeling, I noticed the floor vent for the air conditioning was loose. Inside the vent, I found an envelope with a lot of pictures of me sleeping. The pictures had dates and times written on the back. The only other thing in the vent was a wooden broom handle, sharpened to a point. I truly believe Greg was preparing to hurt me that night, and realized it. Because it was the sleepwalking Greg who was going to do it, so he left to save my life. About 15 years ago, I lived in Sulphur, Oklahoma. My favorite place to play was the Chickasaw National Recreation Area. I loved that park so much that I rode my bike there more than anywhere else, and I explored almost every trail and rode on every road. Every day I would ride my mountain bike up and down the trails and come home by nightfall. Then one night, I had ridden farther than usual. On my way back, I chose to take the trail from Buffalo Springs, where live buffalo roam, and there's a big spring for everyone to enjoy. Riding back, I knew the trail would end soon, and I'd have to cross a stone bridge over the creek before heading up the road home. It was dark, and the only light I had was from the full moon. I was just a short distance away when I felt a sudden pain in my left thigh. I stopped and looked around to see what had hit me. Then I heard a noise like something heavy hitting the ground in front of me. There was a rock about the size of a baseball rolling across the trail. Confused, I started to look up the side of the hill. As I turned my head, I nearly fell off my bike when another rock came flying down and hit my front wheel. When my eyes adjusted, I saw someone very tall, dark, and covered in hair at the top of the hill. He was throwing rock at me and screaming, so I yelled that I had a cell phone and was going to call the police, even though I didn't actually have one because I didn't own a cell phone yet. But this seemed to make him angry, as he started running down the hill toward me. For obvious reasons, I turned on my bike and took off. Just as I crossed the bridge, I heard a loud splash in the creek and saw that a large rock had been thrown. I made it home safely, but I was scared the whole way there. In the following morning, I went to the ranger station and told a ranger I knew there about what happened. He said, "So you were attacked by Bigfoot?" and laughed sarcastically. I replied, "I don't know what it was, but something was trying to hurt me out there." "Okay, Justin. If we hear anything more about Bigfoot, we'll let you know." The following week, while I was riding, that same ranger pulled up next to me and told me to get in, and he said he needed to show me something. We drove to the police department in town. Before we got out of the car, he turned to me and said, "Justin, I have to admit, I didn't believe you when you told me about being attacked, but I found out that a couple was out in the same area last night and got attacked the same way. They said they saw a big hairy creature throwing rocks and sticks and yelling at them. They called the police, and they came out with some other rangers, including me. When we got there and went up the hill, rocks and things were thrown at us, just like they said. Then 2 officers tackled a man to the ground. He was around 6 feet 5 inches tall, covered in mud, with long hair and a big beard. He had run away from the Veterans Center and thought he was in Vietnam and was trying to fight the enemy. We went inside so I could tell the police what happened. They took my statement, and they moved him to a more secure place. A few years ago, when my ex-partner moved out, my daughter and I needed a new place to rent. Our house was too big, and I couldn't afford it alone. It also carried too many painful memories of our family breaking apart. So, I looked ads on Craigslist and found one that seemed perfect. I was so excited that I didn't think to bring anyone with me. I wanted to see the place quickly before someone else took it. So I called and agreed to meet the owner in 30 minutes at the cottage. I was really happy. It was a small house, just right for us with a porch and a small yard. It even had a gas stove, which I really liked. I arrived a few minutes early because I really don't like being late, but I waited in my car until it was time. Then I walked up and knocked on the door. He answered pretty fast, which made me think he might have been watching me through the peephole. But no problem, I thought to myself. Maybe he wanted to get a good look at me. He opened the door wide and smiled a lot. He was a bit older than me and really tall, so I had to look up to talk to him. Then I went into the front room of the house, but just as I was about to ask about utilities, I noticed him lock the deadbolt on the door. Right away, I felt nervous, and my heart started racing. He kept smiling as he came closer to me, and I started stumbling over my words. Something felt really off about the situation. I moved towards the kitchen, still talking, hoping there was a back door. I thought I could say I wanted to see the yard and leave that way. Just as he was about to come closer to me without saying anything since I came in, my phone rang. I hurriedly took it out of my purse and answered. "No, it will not take too much time to come home. Where am I?" Not too far, just a few blocks away." Then I told her the house address of this creepy man. But to be honest, I couldn't hear what she was saying. It was my friend, whose house my daughter and I were staying at temporarily. But keep in mind, she lived a couple of miles away, but he didn't know that. Then as soon as I ended the call, he rushed me out the door, saying he just remembered an important meeting and had to go now. Now I felt so thankful for my friend calling at just the right moment. I didn't hesitate to head for the door. He unlocked it, giving me a strange look as he did. He stood there while I left, saying we could reschedule for later. I'm sure something really bad would have happened if my friend hadn't called when she did. After that, the whole experience of searching for a house felt different to me. I never went to see another place alone, no matter who was renting it out.